The city never truly slept. Even as twilight faded into night, its heartbeat pulsed through the glow of neon signs, the rhythmic hum of engines, and the chatter of hurried footsteps across damp pavement. Rain had fallen earlier that evening, and now the streets gleamed like sheets of black glass, reflecting the dizzying colors of billboards and storefronts. For most, this hour meant winding down, a quiet meal with family, or perhaps the soft comfort of bed. But for Marcus Hale, billionaire industrialist and CEO of Hale Enterprises, the night was merely an extension of the day, a new battlefield where deals were made, contracts signed, and reputations secured. Inside the back of his custom limousine, Marcus leaned against the leather seat, the faint scent of polished mahogany and fine cologne wrapping around him. His eyes darted across the glowing screen of his tablet, reviewing numbers that stretched into the millions. He hardly noticed the world sliding by outside, a blur of lights and shadows beyond the tinted glass. His driver, an ex-military man named Ross, kept the car steady as it rolled through the crowded streets. "Another late night, sir?" Ross asked softly, catching Marcus's gaze in the rearview mirror. Marcus didn't look up from the screen. "The market doesn't sleep. Neither can I." His tone carried no irritation, only a weary finality. The life he had chosen, or perhaps the life that had chosen him, offered no rest. He finally set the tablet aside with a sigh, reaching into the sleek compartment beside him. From it, he withdrew a silver food box, gleaming under the car's dim interior light. Alara, his wife of 10 years, had packed it for him earlier. She had kissed him goodbye at breakfast, her emerald green eyes glimmering with affection as she insisted he not skip meals. "Eat, Marcus," she had said, her voice gentle, persuasive. "You work too hard. Let me take care of you." And now, inside the box lay the dinner she had so carefully prepared. Roasted chicken glazed with herbs, golden mashed potatoes, and a neat slice of chocolate cake adorned with a drizzle of cream. It looked exquisite, as though it had come from the finest restaurant, not his own kitchen. Marcus smiled faintly. Alara always had a flair for perfection. For years, he had leaned on her elegance, her grace at social functions, her unwavering support behind closed doors. In many ways, she was his anchor in a turbulent sea of business rivalries and relentless ambition. His stomach growled softly. The day had been merciless. He had skipped lunch, fueled only by bitter coffee and adrenaline. Now, the sight of the meal stirred genuine hunger. He lifted the fork, poised to take his first bite. Then it happened. A voice, shrill, raw, desperate, cut through the night air, piercing the thick glass of the limousine. "Don't eat that." The words struck like a lightning bolt. Marcus froze, fork suspended inches from his lips. His head snapped toward the window. There, on the curb near a flickering street lamp, stood a young girl. She was small, perhaps 16 at most, her frail figure wrapped in clothes that were more rags than garments. Her hair was tangled and dark, clinging damply to her face. Dirt streaked her cheeks, and her feet were bare against the wet pavement. She wasn't begging. She wasn't asking for coins or food like so many others he had driven past in his insulated world. No, this girl's entire body trembled as she shouted again, her voice breaking with urgency. "Don't eat it, sir. Your wife put poison in it." The driver stiffened. "Ignore her, Mr. Hale," Ross said quickly, his tone dismissive. "Just another street rat looking for attention." But Marcus didn't move. His hand, still holding the fork, felt suddenly heavy. The weight of the girl's words pressed down on him, dragging an unexpected chill through his veins. He lowered the utensil slowly, eyes narrowing as he studied her. The girl met his gaze head-on, unflinching despite the intimidating shadow of the limousine towering over her. Her eyes, large, dark, and luminous, were filled not with greed, but with a wild, desperate sincerity. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much for her years, someone carrying a truth too heavy to keep silent. Ross muttered under his breath, ready to drive off as the light changed. But Marcus raised a hand. "Wait!" The limousine halted in the middle of the street, horns blaring from impatient drivers behind them. Marcus barely noticed. His focus was fixed entirely on the girl. He pressed the button to lower his window. The cool night air swept in, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke, rain, and street food. "You there?" Marcus called, his voice calm but edged with curiosity. "What did you just say?" The girl took a hesitant step closer, her thin shoulders rising and falling with quick breaths. For a moment, Marcus thought she might run, swallowed by the anonymity of the city. But instead, she lifted her chin, defiant despite her trembling frame. "I said don't eat it," she repeated, louder now. "Your wife put poison in it. If you take a bite, you'll die." Her words hung in the air, absurd and chilling all at once. Marcus's first instinct was disbelief. Alara? Poison him? The thought was laughable. She had been his partner in every sense, sharing in his triumphs and weathering his failures. They had built their empire side by side. She had no reason, no possible reason, to want him dead. And yet, something about the girl's tone unsettled him. It wasn't the wild ravings of a drunk or the calculated lies of a con artist. It was raw, unpolished truth. He studied the meal again, its flawless presentation suddenly sinister. He imagined the powder she described, tasteless, invisible, waiting patiently for him to swallow. A phantom bitterness curled at the back of his throat. "Sir," Ross urged, eyes darting nervously to the rearview mirror. "We should leave. This is beneath your attention." But Marcus couldn't pull his gaze away. The fork clattered softly as he set it down, the silver box snapping shut with finality. Inside his chest, his heart beat harder, faster. The billionaire who feared nothing in boardrooms and negotiations now found himself shaken by a barefoot street girl whose name he didn't even know. The limousine's interior had always felt like a fortress to Marcus Hale, an impenetrable cocoon of leather and steel that separated him from the chaos of the streets. Tonight, however, that comfort had been fractured. The echo of the girl's voice lingered inside him, circling like a vulture over his thoughts. "Don't eat it. Your wife put poison in it." Ridiculous words, impossible words. And yet, his mind replayed them again and again, until they no longer sounded like the ravings of a mad girl, but a prophecy whispered in the dark. Marcus leaned back, the box of food still resting untouched on the seat beside him. His hunger had vanished, replaced by a gnawing unease that no wealth could silence. Ross cleared his throat. "Sir, we should move. People are staring." Indeed, horns still blared behind them, impatient drivers craning necks to see why a limousine sat motionless in the lane. But Marcus ignored them. "Open the door," he said. Ross blinked. "Sir, open the door." There was no room for argument in Marcus's tone. The driver sighed, pushed a button, and the locks clicked open. Marcus stepped out into the night. The city air hit him like a wave, cold, damp, heavy with the sense of smoke and fried food from a nearby vendor. For a man who usually moved through polished lobbies and exclusive boardrooms, the gritty streets felt foreign, almost hostile. His polished shoes splashed against shallow puddles as he walked toward the girl. She stood frozen under the street lamp, eyes wide as though she couldn't believe he had actually come to her. For a moment, she looked like she might bolt, but Marcus raised a hand in a gesture of calm. "I want you to tell me," he said, his voice low, steady, the same voice that had commanded boardrooms across the globe. "Why did you say that? Why would you accuse my wife of this?" The girl swallowed hard. Her throat worked as though each word was a battle. "Because I saw her." Marcus frowned. "Explain." "I clean sometimes. Near your neighborhood," she said quickly, words tumbling over themselves. "People let me wash dishes for scraps. Sometimes I look through the windows when I'm waiting. And one night I saw her." Her eyes darted to the silver box in his hand, then back to his face. She had the food. She was putting something in it. White powder. She wasn't cooking. She wasn't seasoning. She was hiding it. Marcus's grip on the box tightened, his knuckles whitening. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that you were peering into my house?" The girl flinched. "I wasn't spying. I wasn't." She paused, her voice cracking. I was hungry. I sit near your kitchen sometimes because the smells make me forget my stomach. That's all. I wasn't trying to. She bit her lip, shame coloring her dirty cheeks. Marcus studied her closely. Her clothes were torn, the hem of her shirt frayed to threads. Her hair was tangled, and her ribs were faintly visible beneath the thin fabric. She wasn't lying about being hungry. Her body was a canvas of poverty. Even if you did see something, Marcus pressed, his tone sharpening. Why should I believe you? What could you possibly gain from this lie? Her dark eyes locked onto his, glistening with a desperate fire. Nothing. I don't want anything. I don't want your money. I don't want food. I don't want you to die. The raw sincerity in her voice silenced him. For a long moment, Marcus heard nothing but the distant roar of traffic, the dripping of water from the street lamp above, and his own heart pounding like a drum. He had built his empire on skepticism, on questioning motives and uncovering lies. Every contract he signed, every hand he shook, he analyzed the angle, the hidden agenda. And yet here was a girl with nothing, offering him a truth he couldn't dismiss. He thought of Alara again. Elegant Alara, whose laughter charmed donors at galas, whose presence graced magazine covers, whose devotion had always seemed unwavering. Could that devotion have been a mask all along? Could 10 years of marriage have been nothing more than a carefully orchestrated play? The thought was unbearable, and yet the seed of doubt had been planted. Ross, Marcus said suddenly, turning back toward the car. Get her inside. The driver balked. Sir, with respect, she's... He cast a disdainful glance at the girl's ragged clothes. I said get her inside. Ross exhaled through his nose but obeyed. The rear door opened, and the girl hesitated, looking between Marcus and the safety of the shadows she had always known. Come, Marcus urged softly. You've said your piece. Now I need you to prove it. Reluctantly, she climbed into the limousine. The contrast was jarring. Her bare feet sank into plush carpeting, her frail body swallowed by the expanse of leather seats. She sat awkwardly on the edge, as though afraid to leave a stain. Marcus slid in after her, shutting the world outside. For a few moments, silence reigned. The girl twisted her hands nervously, and Marcus watched her with an intensity that made her shrink into herself. Finally, he spoke. What's your name? Lena, she whispered. Lena, Marcus repeated, testing the sound of it. A name that carried no titles, no lineage, no fortune. Just a fragile life clinging to survival. He looked down at the silver box again. Its polished surface reflected his face. Hard, uncertain, framed by the faint tremor of his hand. Doubt. A crack in the armor he had built around his trust in Alara. And cracks, Marcus knew, had a way of spreading until the whole structure came crashing down. The limousine glided through the iron gates of the Hale estate, its tires crunching softly over the gravel driveway. The mansion rose before them, a monument of glass and stone lit up against the night sky. Its towering windows reflected the moonlight, casting an almost ethereal glow across the perfectly manicured lawns. For Marcus, this place had always been a symbol of triumph, proof of how far he had climbed, how untouchable he had become. But as the car rolled to a halt, that sense of invincibility wavered. The mansion now loomed like a stage set, its perfection masking secrets he was no longer certain he wanted to uncover. Beside him, Lena sat stiff and silent. Her hands were clenched into fists in her lap, her wide eyes drinking in the splendor of a world she had never imagined stepping into. The chandeliers spilling golden light through the windows, the rows of marble columns, the heavy oak doors. It was a palace compared to the damp alleys she had called home. Ross parked and opened the door. Marcus stepped out first, the night air sharp against his face. Lena hesitated, then followed, barefoot on the cold stone steps. The front doors opened with practiced grace, and there stood Alara. She was breathtaking, as always, draped in a deep emerald gown that shimmered under the porch lights. Her dark hair swept back to reveal high cheekbones and a smile that could have belonged to royalty. For a moment, Marcus almost faltered. The woman before him was the same Alara who had stood beside him at countless galas, who had whispered encouragements before board meetings, who had kissed him goodbye that very morning. But then her eyes fell on Lena. The smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of irritation quickly smoothed into composure. "Marcus," she said warmly, though her gaze lingered on the ragged girl. "You're home early, and with company." Marcus lifted the silver box. Its surface gleamed in the porch light, heavy with unspoken accusation. "You prepared this for me?" Alara's brows arched delicately. "Of course. I thought you might get hungry. Did you enjoy it?" Her voice was silky, flawless, the kind of tone that could charm a room of investors. But Marcus had spent years listening to liars in boardrooms, watching how their eyes shifted, how their lips tightened when they weren't telling the whole truth. And he saw it now, just the faintest crack in her facade. "I didn't eat it," Marcus said evenly. "I was told not to." The girl's voice cut through the silence, trembling but firm. "Because she poisoned it." Alara turned sharply, her eyes flashing as they landed on Lena. Her mask of charm flickered, a spark of venom breaking through. "What nonsense is this? Marcus, why have you brought this child into our home?" Marcus stepped closer, his voice cold. "If there's no truth to her words, Alara, then you won't mind proving it. Taste the food." For the first time, Alara faltered. It was subtle, a tightening of her shoulders, a brief hesitation before her lips curved into a practiced smile. "You can't be serious," she said softly, almost amused. "After all these years, you doubt me because of a filthy stranger?" Marcus didn't blink. "Taste it." Her smile wavered. She glanced at the box, then back at him, her emerald eyes searching his face for some crack in his resolve. But Marcus stood like stone, unyielding. "Why should I?" she said finally, her voice sharper now. "Because you claim it's safe. Because if I eat it, I'm supposed to live. So eat, Alara. Show me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Lena's small frame seemed to shrink into the marble doorway, but her eyes never left Alara. Alara's composure cracked. With a sudden motion, she knocked the silver box from Marcus's hand. It clattered against the floor, the roasted chicken and potatoes scattering across the marble like broken ornaments. Her voice rose, venomous now, stripped of elegance. "How dare you question me? After everything I've given you, after everything I endured in your shadow, you accuse me of this." Marcus's heart pounded, but his voice was calm, dangerous. "Endured? You've lived a life most only dream of. What have you been denied, Alara?" Her eyes blazed, her control unraveling. "Freedom," she spat. "I was nothing before you, Marcus. You plucked me out of obscurity, yes, but you made me your trophy, your arm candy. I smiled when you told me to smile. I played the perfect wife while you built your empire. And what did I get in return? A gilded cage." Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her voice cracking into something wild. "So yes, I poisoned you. I wanted an end to this life. I wanted everything you've kept from me. The company, the fortune, the power, without being chained to you any longer." The words struck Marcus like blows. Betrayal was something he had braced himself for in business, from partners, rivals, even friends. But not from her. Never from her. Lena gasped softly, her small hand gripping Marcus's sleeve as though to ground him. Marcus stared at Alara, his face pale but his eyes cold. "You would have let me die." Alara's lips curled into a sneer. "You were already dead, Marcus. A man chained to his empire, blind to the woman beside him. All I did was cut the last thread." The front hall was silent except for her heavy breathing and the faint crackle of the fireplace beyond. The grandeur of the mansion seemed hollow now, a stage for a marriage that had been nothing but performance. Marcus straightened, his voice steady. "Ross." The driver appeared instantly, stepping from the shadows of the entryway. "Take her away," Marcus said. Alara's eyes widened, then narrowed. She thrashed as Ross moved to restrain her, her voice turning into a shriek. "You'll regret this, Marcus. You'll lose everything. You think this rat saved you, but she's your ruin." Her words echoed through the marble halls as Ross dragged her struggling form away. The perfect image of Alara Hale, socialite, philanthropist, devoted wife, shattered into pieces before Marcus's eyes, revealing the venom beneath. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stood unmoving, staring at the scattered food across the floor. Could have been his last supper. And the only reason it wasn't was because of a girl who had nothing but the courage to speak the truth. The heavy oak doors slammed shut behind Alara, her screams fading into the night as the guards carried her away. The echo lingered in the vast marble hall, bouncing off the high ceilings and chandeliers until it dissolved into silence. Marcus Hale stood motionless, his figure casting a long shadow across the spilled remains of his untouched dinner. The roasted chicken and mashed potatoes that had once seemed so appetizing were now scattered across the floor like evidence at a crime scene. The faint smell of rosemary hung in the air, sharp and mocking. He stared at it without blinking, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. The world he had constructed so carefully, brick by brick, deal by deal, moment by moment, had been fractured with a single truth. His wife, his partner, his confidant, his anchor had plotted his death, and she had confessed it with venom in her eyes. The marble beneath his feet felt colder than it ever had. The golden chandeliers above, usually symbols of triumph and luxury, seemed to glare down at him, harsh and unyielding. Even the mansion itself felt like a stranger now, its grandeur twisted into something hollow. Lena shifted nervously by the doorway. The girl's small frame was dwarfed by the towering columns, her bare feet leaving faint marks on the polished stone. She looked like she didn't belong, an intruder in a palace, but her presence was the only thing that tethered Marcus to reality. "Mr. Hale." Her voice was small, fragile. He blinked, as though waking from a trance. Slowly, he turned toward her. Her dark eyes held no judgment, only worry. She had no stake in his fortune, no role in his empire. And yet, she had been the one to speak when no one else dared. Marcus exhaled, a sound closer to a shudder than a sigh. "She admitted it," he said, more to himself than to Lena. His voice cracked, raw in a way it never had in boardrooms or press conferences. 10 years, and she admitted it without hesitation. He sank into a chair at the edge of the hall, running a hand through his hair. For the first time in years, the weight of his empire, his wealth, his reputation, all of it, felt meaningless. What use was any of it if the woman he had trusted most saw him as nothing more than a stepping stone? Lena approached hesitantly, as though afraid she might be cast out at any moment. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want you to find out like this. I couldn't let you eat it." Marcus lifted his gaze to her. There was no deceit in her face. She wasn't polished or elegant, wasn't adorned with diamonds or gowns. Her cheeks were still streaked with dirt, her clothes worn thin. But her eyes shone with a clarity he hadn't seen in years. "Why?" he asked suddenly. His voice was sharp, but not angry, desperate. "Why risk it? Why shout to a man like me? You could have walked away, and no one would have blamed you. Why save me?" Lena fidgeted, staring down at her hands. "Because—" she hesitated, then looked up, her voice trembling but true. "Because I've lost people before, people who didn't deserve to die, and I couldn't watch it happen again." Her words cut deeper than Alara's confession had. Marcus leaned back, the truth settling in his chest like a stone. He realized with a pang that he had been surrounded by people for years, business partners, investors, acquaintances, but none of them had acted out of pure concern. Every smile had an angle, every word a price. But Lena, a girl with nothing, had given him everything. The irony was cruel. He pressed his palms together, staring at the ground. "I don't know what's real anymore," he admitted quietly. "If Alara could wear a mask for a decade, who else have I been blind to? How much of my life has been a lie?" The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the distant crackle of the fireplace. Finally, Lena spoke again. "Not everything is a lie," she said softly. "Some people are cruel, but not everyone." You can still choose who you trust, even if it hurts. Her words, simple yet profound, lodged in his mind. A street girl, offering him the kind of wisdom he hadn't found in all his wealth. Marcus closed his eyes, memories flooding back. The nights Alara had stood at his side, the laughter they had shared, the whispered promises. All of it felt like glass now, shattered into jagged pieces he couldn't hold without bleeding. When he opened his eyes again, Lena was still there, watching him with quiet patience. "You saved my life," he said, his voice low but steady. "And in doing so, you destroyed the illusion I've been living in. For that, I owe you more than I can ever repay." Lena shook her head quickly. "You don't owe me anything. I only did what anyone should do." Marcus almost smiled, though it was heavy with sorrow. "You'll find, Lena, that not many would have done what you did, especially in this world." He stood, straightening his shoulders, though his body still carried the weight of betrayal. The illusion of perfection was gone. Alara had seen to that, but perhaps in its place something new could be built. Something real. The mansion around him no longer felt like a fortress. Felt exposed, vulnerable. But maybe vulnerability was the beginning of truth. He looked at Lena again. "You don't have to return to the streets tonight. Not after what you've done. Stay here. I'll see that you're cared for." Her eyes widened, disbelief etched across her face. "Here? In this place?" "Yes," Marcus said simply. "It's the least I can do." For the first time since the confrontation, Lena's lips curved into the faintest smile. It was small, timid, but real. And in that fragile smile, Marcus found something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The night dragged on, long after Alara's screams had been silenced behind iron bars. The mansion, usually buzzing with staff and music and movement, was eerily quiet. Only the steady crackle of the fireplace in Marcus's study filled the silence. Marcus sat in the leather armchair closest to the fire, staring into the flames as though they might reveal answers hidden from him. The warmth licked his skin, but inside he felt cold, hollow. On the small table beside him sat the untouched silver box. It had been retrieved from the marble floor, its contents ruined, its promise broken. Marcus had considered throwing it into the fire, but something had stopped him. It wasn't just food anymore. It was a symbol, the line between life and death, trust and betrayal. Across from him, Lena sat gingerly on the edge of another chair, her small frame swallowed by the cushions. She had been given clean clothes, borrowed from one of the staff, though they still hung loosely on her thin frame. Her hair had been brushed, her face washed. Yet despite these changes, her eyes remained the same, sharp, watchful, uncertain. For a while, neither spoke. Marcus didn't know where to begin, and Lena didn't know if she had the right to. She was still an outsider in this world of chandeliers and velvet curtains, a world she had entered only because she had dared to shout the truth. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "What happens to someone like you tomorrow, Lena?" She blinked, startled by the question. "Tomorrow?" "Yes," he said, turning toward her. "If I hadn't stopped tonight, if you hadn't shouted, what would tomorrow have looked like for you?" She looked down at her hands, twisting them together. "The same as yesterday. I would have woken up in the alley near the bakery, tried to find work washing dishes, maybe sweeping floors. Maybe I'd get enough scraps to eat. Maybe I wouldn't. That's all." Her words were simple, matter-of-fact, but they struck Marcus like a hammer. He thought of the life he lived, chauffeurs, tailored suits, gala dinners. And then he thought of hers. Alleyways, hunger, scraps. How close they had been tonight, and yet how impossibly far apart. "You saved my life," Marcus said quietly. "And for that, I owe you something greater than gratitude." Lena shook her head quickly. "No, sir. You don't owe me anything. I didn't do it for money or reward. I just couldn't stay quiet." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "And that's exactly why I owe you. People in my world, people with everything, they only act if there's something in it for them. But you had nothing and you risked everything. That is worth more than all the wealth I've built." She looked at him, unsure whether to believe the sincerity in his voice. What do you mean? Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I mean that tomorrow won't be like yesterday for you. Not anymore. You will not go back to alleys or scraps. You deserve better. Her eyes widened. You're saying I can stay here? Yes, Marcus said simply. This mansion has more rooms than I know what to do with. More food than I could ever eat. But more than that, I can give you an education. A chance to build a life you've never had. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I don't belong here. I wouldn't fit in. People will laugh at me. Marcus's voice softened. Let them laugh. 10 years I lived beside someone who smiled in public and sharpened knives in private. Appearances mean nothing, Lena. What matters is truth. And you've already proven you have more of that than most people I've ever known. The tears spilled over, rolling down her cheeks. She covered her face with her hands, overcome. For years, she had fought only to survive each day. She had never dared to dream of anything more. And now, in one night, she was being offered the impossible. Not just survival, but a future. Marcus rose and crossed to the window, staring out at the sprawling city lights beyond his gates. For years, he had seen the city as a kingdom to conquer, each skyscraper another trophy. But tonight, he saw it differently. He saw alleys he had never walked, children he had never noticed, lives he had ignored while chasing his own empire. Alara had poisoned more than his food. She had poisoned his vision, convincing him that wealth alone was enough. Lena, in her ragged honesty, had given him back his sight. When he turned back, she was still wiping her tears, her small shoulders trembling. He spoke gently. From tonight forward, you're not just a street girl. You're Lena, and you have a future. Her head lifted, her eyes wide with disbelief. Do you mean it? I mean it, he said firmly. Whatever you want to become, a student, an artist, a doctor, it will be yours to pursue. You've already proven you have the courage to speak truth. Now you'll have the chance to live it. For the first time, a genuine smile spread across Lena's face. It was shy, uncertain, but radiant in its own way. And in that smile, Marcus saw the beginning of something new. Not just for her, but for himself as well. He had been betrayed by the person closest to him, but saved by the one farthest from his world. It was a cruel irony, but also a gift. It reminded him that salvation doesn't always come dressed in silk and diamonds. Sometimes, it comes barefoot, with dirt on its cheeks, and a voice that dares to cry out against silence. Marcus returned to his chair, the fire's warmth flickering across his face. He no longer felt cold. The illusion of his perfect marriage was gone. But in its ashes, something real had emerged. Trust, fragile yet true. And hope, carried in the heart of a girl who had nothing to lose, and yet gave him everything. That night, Marcus Hale made himself a promise. He would never again measure worth in wealth or power, but in honesty and courage. And Lena, the girl who had shouted in the street, would never go hungry again. Because sometimes the poorest soul carries the richest heart.